Hey there, team. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're actually going to be covering the history of the trolls of the Warcraft universe today. Out of all the species of Azeroth, the trolls are some of, if not the most, unique and diverse in the entire series, having a bunch of cultures, clans, and empires that spanned across the entire continent. Trolls have been around the Warcraft series since the second installment, and they've been in the lore since the very beginning. This video will cover all the lore of the trolls pre-Mists of Pandaria, which means we're going to be going over the origins of the trolls, their empires, their wars, the stories of those who joined the Horde, the stories of those who didn't, and a whole lot more. Think of this as kind of a bridge between the Cataclysm expansion and the Mists of Pandaria expansion. With all that, stretch your back, roll your shoulders, and squat down into a comfortable position, because this is all the lore you need to know about the trolls of Warcraft. Up to Mists of Pandaria. The trolls have been around for longer than any playable race in World of Warcraft. They are beings that are as tall as Tauren, as agile as elves, as strong as orcs, and are extremely proficient in magic. The trolls were some of the earliest sentient life that existed on Azeroth. They've basically been around for forever. The trolls started out living around the Well of Eternity before slowly migrating down towards southern Kalimdor, the land now known as Zandalar, which was the resting place of many of the wild gods. See, the trolls worshipped a lot of the wild gods who they called the Loa. The Loa are of the same type of being as the Guardians of Ashenvale and the Emerald Dream, but they are also a little different. Loa gain power through worship, and they also control certain realms and magic that are different from the nature magic controlled by the wild gods of Ashenvale. The trolls originally were all of one kind and unified as one tribe, a tribe that would evolve over time into an empire, the Zandalari Empire, and that was populous and powerful. Even though they were the only troll empire around, they weren't the only major power growing in old Azeroth. A race of Titan-forged warriors known as the Mogu had created their own empire in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. The Zandalari and the Mogu Empire formed an alliance, both believing that the other wouldn't dare betray them, since they both thought themselves more powerful than the other. However, the Mogu Emperor Lei Shen would lead his army along with some Zandalari allies into the land of Uldum. There, Lei Shen would meet his end at the hands of a Titan weapon, and the Mogu Empire would never flourish to the same strength again. The Mogu Empire would collapse on itself, being capped off by the Pandaren Revolution. But before the Mogu fell, they had promised land to the Zandalari, and the Pandaren had no intention of honoring that agreement made between their former masters and the trolls. So a Zandalari invasion force was sent to conquer the new Pandaren land, led by a warrior named Benghazi. During the war between the Zandalari and the Pandaren, a young Pandaren named Jiang was able to tame cloud serpents and use them against the invading trolls. Eventually, Benghazi planned to resurrect the dead Lei Shen and bring the Mogu back as allies, but Jiang sacrificed herself to kill Benghazi, stopping the ritual and causing the trolls to retreat back to their own land. The Zandalari were divided by a caste system, and over time, those who were considered of a lower caste would leave Zandalar, venturing off to different corners of Kalimdor. The higher-ups of the Zandalari caste scoffed at the trolls who were foolish enough to leave their empire, and they expected the lower castes to come crawling back. Instead, those lower castes formed their own thriving tribes, the Amani, the Drakari, and the Gurabashi. Later on, a group of Gurabashi witch doctors that had been exiled from their tribe ended up finding the resting place of Kithix, an incredibly powerful warlord of the old gods. Kithix was awoken by the exiled witch doctors, and after slaughtering his summoners, he called forth the old god forces that lay dormant in the earth and began a war against the Zandalari trolls. The Zandalari trolls held off the armies of Kithix for a while, but they were greatly outnumbered and soon to be overwhelmed. Zandalar reached out to the tribes who had left and pleaded for an alliance to save not just Zandalar, but all of Trollkind. The other tribes agreed, and the Empire of Zul was formed. The United Troll forces pushed back the old god's assault and continued to do so over the course of thousands of years until the insectoid armies of the old gods split in two. One section headed to the deserts in the south, and the other section headed to the wastelands in the north. And even their leader, Kithix, was gravely wounded by the trolls Loa and had retreated to the northeast. The troll tribes ventured out to slay the retreating forces of the old gods, with the Gurabashi beating back the Akir and conquering the south, the Drakari beating back the Akir and taking control of the north, and the Amani hunting down and slaying Kithix and taking control of the northeast. Eventually, the unity of the tribes faded as they became more detached from the Empire of Zul and became their own empires over time. Now, there was a group of trolls that did not participate in the Empire of Zul, and they were a group of dark trolls who had left Zandalar long ago, but did not respond to the call to fight Kithix and his Akir. This group of dark trolls lived along the coasts of the Well of Eternity, and over time they were heavily affected by the Well's magical powers. These trolls would come to worship the moon goddess Elune and the wild gods of Hyjal instead of the Loa of Zandalar, and ultimately, those trolls would evolve into the Kaldurai, or as we call them, the Night Elves. The Kaldurai and their empire grew over time, and soon they began warring with the trolls. While the trolls had numbers, the Kaldurai had incredibly powerful magic thanks to the Well of Eternity, and they were able to quickly push the trolls out of their territory. The Troll Empires and the Kaldurai Empire eventually came to a non-aggression pact. The trolls were no match for the magic of the Night Elves, and the elves had already conquered so much of Kalimdor and greatly reduced the Troll Empires in size that the trolls had no choice but to agree to the Night Elves' demands. And because of this, the trolls of Azeroth would never really forget and never really forgive the Kaldurai. So when the Night Elves' reckless use of magic eventually drew the Burning Legion to Azeroth, the trolls did not send aid to fight against the demons during the War of the Ancients. And when the War of the Ancients ended, the Kaldurai Empire was in shambles and Kalimdor was sundered into different continents, completely dividing the troll empires throughout the world. The Drakari lived in Zuldrak on the northern continent of Northrend, the Amani lived in Zul-Aman in the northern part of the eastern continent of Azeroth, and the Gurabashi lived in the southern part of Azeroth in Zul-Gurub. The former Gurabashi, now separated by the Sundering, calling themselves the Sand Furies, lived in Zul'Farrak in the southern part of the western continent of Kalimdor, and the land of Zandalar was shattered into an island completely cut off from the rest of the world, and that is where the Zandalari have remained till this very day. After the War of the Ancients, there were Night Elves who still wanted to use the arcane magic of the Well of Eternity, and had no interest in using the druidic magic being taught by Malfurion Stormrage. These Night Elves were called the Highborn, and the Highborn ended up being banished from Night Elf lands, and they set sail to the eastern continent, landing in Tirisfal Glades. The Highborn would engage with the earliest of human tribes and also skirmish with the Amani trolls, whose empire the Highborn were now invading. Eventually, the Highborn would make their way to what is now called Quel'Thalas, and by this point they had completely changed in form, from Night Elf to High Elf. And this is when the Amani would begin their seemingly never-ending war against the High Elves. It was around 4,000 years after the founding of Quel'Thalas that the Amani trolls were strong enough and vast enough to start pushing back the High Elves and their magic. While the elves did have their powerful sorcery, the trolls had endless numbers and an endless bloodlust. Eventually, the high elves were battered back so far that they were close to falling to the Amani. The elves even sent out for aid from their newly established human kingdom of Arathor. The humans agreed to help so long as the elves were willing to teach the humans some of their magic. Eventually, the Arathi humans joined the High Elves in their war against the Amani, but unfortunately, the alliance of men and elves was pushed back to the human fort in the Alterac Mountains. There, in the mountains, the elven and newly taught human mages unleashed a massive firestorm on the troll army, decimating the Amani forces to the point that they had to retreat from Alterac to Zulaman, and eventually retreat from the war. And with their utter defeat at the hands of the human and elf alliance, the forest trolls would never truly rise to that same level of might ever again. The troll empires began to wither. Over thousands of years of fighting Akir, then night elves, then high elves, then humans, and then fighting themselves, the trolls no longer held the same imposing grip on the world as they once did in millennia past. Now disease, famine, and forces they couldn't physically fight back against began to plague the Gurabashi Empire of Stranglethorn. In their dire need, the Gurabashi sought out aid from their Loa, and the one who responded was Hakar, the Loa of Blood. Hakar was a powerful god, and he demanded daily sacrifices, with his final goal having him being summoned into the realm of Azeroth. It didn't take long for the Gurabashi to realize that they were killing a lot of their own citizens in the name of Hakar, and many tribes in the Gurabashi Empire began to stir with the thought of rebellion against Hakar and his loyal priests, the Atal-Ai. The Zandalari trolls kept tabs on the growing empire of the Gurabashi, and they were happy to see their fellow trolls begin to thrive once again. However, the Zandalari soon realized that Hakar, the Soul Flayer, was behind the recent rise of Gurabashi power. Many trolls of Zandalar headed out to Stranglethorn and warned their kinsmen of the dangers of Hakar and the threat the Loa of Blood posed to the world. With that, most of the Gurabashi tribes, along with some of the Zandalari, revolted against Hakar and his blood priests, eventually killing Hakar's avatar and banishing any surviving Atal-Ai priests to the swamplands north of Zul'Gurub. The Gurabashi Empire fell after the defeat of Hakar, with the remaining tribes splitting off into parts of the jungle and islands off the coast. While the Atal-Ai were able to construct a temple in the Swamp of Sorrows, in the Temple of Atal Hakar, the Atal-Ai tried to summon the Loa of Blood back into Azeroth again. But this time, they were ultimately stopped by the aspect of the green dragonflight, Ysera. Ysera and her dragons destroyed the temple and sank it to the bottom of the Swamp of Sorrows, where it would remain dormant for over 1,000 years. We're getting closer to modern times now. During Warcraft 2, the Orcish Horde had pushed their way up the eastern continent and ended up in the land of Lordaeron and the Eastern Kingdoms. It was while the Orcs were fighting the High Elves in the Human Alliance that the Amani Trolls took notice of the conflict. Zul'jin, the leader and great hero of the Amani Trolls, had rallied together most of the Forest Troll tribes, and with them, joined the Horde. The Horde had fought their way up to Quel'Thalas, where they then began a siege on the High Elf Kingdom. Unfortunately for the Horde, the Human Alliance had shown up and pushed the Horde back. War Chief of the Orcish Horde, Orgrim Doomhammer, decided that tactically it would be better to give up on Quel'Thalas for the time being and to attack the more vulnerable human kingdom of Lordaeron instead. Zul'jin outright refused to give up his chance to take out the High Elves, and he, along with most of the Forest Trolls, left the Horde, choosing to stay behind in Quel'Thalas. The Amani Trolls were then pushed farther and farther away from elf-controlled lands. Zul'jin was eventually captured and tortured by elven rangers, and a small Amani warband attacked the ranger outpost, which distracted the elves long enough for Zul'jin to escape, although at the cost of his arm and eye. The Forest Trolls, who weren't still fighting alongside the Horde, retreated deep into the woods and mountains, and most of the Amani had holed themselves up inside Zulaman, completely defeated. The Horde was eventually defeated and the orcs were imprisoned by the Alliance for a decade or two, after which they were liberated by the new orc war chief Thrall. Thrall and his new horde would leave the human-filled lands of the Eastern Kingdoms and set off for Kalimdor. On their way to the new continent, they ran into an island full of dark spear trolls who gladly joined the horde after the orcs saved them from their enemies attacking their home. The Darkspear, led by Vol'jin, would fight alongside the orcs as they made their home in Kalimdor. In fact, Durotar and Orgrimmar, as well as most land in Kalimdor claimed by the Horde, was equally earned by the blood of the Darkspear trolls, as well as the orcs. The Darkspear, who once belonged to the Gurabashi Empire, had become loyal members of Thrall's Horde, and they would stand with the Horde over any troll empire until the end. Tanaris was once a lush jungle, but after the Sundering it turned into a vast desert. The former jungle trolls who lived there became sand trolls, and unfortunately the lands they once controlled were covered by sand over time. The now called Sand Fury trolls' only real piece of land left is their capital of Zul'Farrak. Or I guess I should say that Zul'Farrak was the only piece of land left. By the end of Classic World of Warcraft, the Sand Troll City had been raided and ransacked, and all the trolls within were eliminated by treasure hunters and adventurers. And now I covered what happened in Zul'Gurub in more detail in my Classic WoW lore video, but real quick, the Atal'ai were able to successfully summon Hakar the Soul Flayer into Azeroth, and the Blood Loa took control over Zul'Gurub. The Zandalari, along with the Dark Spear Trolls, called for aid from the Horde and the Alliance, and they were able to invade Zul'Gurub and kill Hakar, and crumble the Gurabashi Empire in the process. And up in the north, Zul'jin had started to rebuild the Amani army and used dark powers to help him do so. The Amani were able to capture the spirits of some of their powerful Loa and use them to increase the strength and abilities of some of their greatest warriors. With the Dark Portal open, and the Horde and Alliance mainly focused on dealing with Illidan and the Burning Legion, Zul'jin and the Amani ventured out of Zul'Aman to take the High Elves by surprise. Unfortunately for the trolls, the High Elves were now the Blood Elves, and the Blood Elves were allies of the new Horde, which was something that really pissed off Zul'jin. While attempting to raid the lands of Quel'The the Lost, the Amani were pushed back by the Blood Elves and their new allies. Eventually, champions of Azeroth, spearheaded by the Blood Elves, ventured into Zul'Aman to stop the Amani warbands and to kill Zul'jin for good. Afterwards, the Amani fell silent again. Without their hero warlord alive to unite them, the survivors succumbed to infighting. And just like with Zul'Gurub, I covered what happened to Zul'Drak in a previous video, but just to quickly recap, the Ice Trolls of Northrend lived in their massive capital of Zul'Drak. However, they shared their continent of Northrend with the Lich King and his undead armies. It didn't take long for the Jakari Trolls of Zul'Drak to start losing their war against the endless legions of the Undead Scourge. In their desperation, the Jakari imprisoned and then in some cases murdered and ate their own Loas in order to become strong enough to push back against the undead. In the end, it was all in vain, with several leaders of the Jakari aggressively pushing against enemies of the Lich King, like the Argent Crusade and the Knights of the Ebon Blade, which caused the Champions of the Light to clear out most of the warriors of Zul'Drak, and the Scourge eventually consumed whatever remained. And finally, after Deathwing caused the Cataclysm, but before the Hour of Twilight was stopped, the Trolls of Zandalar ventured out to the lands of Azeroth to recruit any and all surviving troll nations to a specific cause. This cause was led by Zul the Prophet, and the Zandalari reached out to the survivors of the Gurabashi and Amani empires in an attempt to reform the Empire of Zul. In Zul'Gurub, the Gurabashi trolls rallied with the aid of the Zandalari, and they were able to harness the power of the Loa once again. Jindo the Hexer had captured the spirit of Hakar and was channeling the Loa's essence in order to power his tribe. The Gurabashi trolls then launched a massive wave of assaults throughout all of Stranglethorn Vale. Only Vol'jin and his Darkspear tribe remained loyal to the Horde, and they were able to push back against the Gurabashi, eventually infiltrating the city of Zul'Gurub. There, the Darkspear led a combined offense of Horde and Alliance in slaying the Zandalari High Priests and Gurubashi warlords that lay inside, ending with the defeat of Jin'do, who was murdered at the hands of Hakkar. And while the Loa of Blood wasn't unleashed into the realm of Azeroth, it wasn't destroyed either. But the Gurubashi and its followers throughout Stranglethorn were finally dealt with for the last time. The Amani were lost without Zul'Jin, but during his brief absence, the warrior Da'Akara took over as the new warlord. With the aid of the Zandalari, Da'Akara was able to remake some of the Amani forces, but even the aid of the Zandalari wasn't going to be enough. The Blood Elves, now able to be fully focused on dealing with their neighboring troll threat, sent their best soldiers, the Farstrider Rangers, to deal with the Amani. The Farstriders were joined by the High Elven Rangers of Dalaran and by the Darkspear Trolls, personally led by Vol'jin himself. Vol'jin and the elite warriors that followed him stormed the gates of Zul'Aman and were able to vanquish all of the Amani that were inside, putting an end to the Amani Empire for good, and putting a stop to the Zandalari Trolls' quest for conquest. Or so he thought. But the prophet Zul had one last plan. He sent his troops to a far-off land where the Zandalari Trolls would bring back to life a monstrous thing. The ancient ally of the Zandalar, who we'll cover next time in Mists of Pandaria. And that about does it, so I'll say the stuff. Some things here I skipped, and some things there I cut. We all know Devil May Cry, right? Okay, maybe not no, but... This video was created to explain the story of the Warcraft series leading up to Warcraft 3. None of it is required to understand the plot of Warcraft 3, but it does explain all of the background for the main characters of the Third War, as well as the setup for the war itself. I'm going to be covering Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3 Beyond the Dark Portal, along with the novels Rise of the Horde, The Last Guardian, Lord of Clans, Arthas, and the War of the Ancients trilogy. This is an abbreviated history, and because of that, I will be skimming over certain details and characters that are irrelevant to the plot of Warcraft 3 and its expansion, The Frozen Throne.
With honor.
Okay, so with all of that, here we go. Alrighty, if you want to know the lore of the Warcraft games leading up to Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos, you gotta go back a few years. So there's this planet called Draenor. It's inhabited by orcs and also Draenei. The two people are just hanging out when one day an orc chieftain named Ner'zhul is visited by the ghost of his dead wife. She tells him he has to unite the orc clans and everything will be great, so Ner'zhul goes off and gets all the orcs together. Now the orcs are shamanistic. They believe in nature and elemental forces. These elements visit Ner'zhul and go, dude, you're being tricked by a demon, you shouldn't have united all of the orcs. So Ner'zhul resigns from being a part of the new orc horde, and runner-up to Ner'zhul is a frail orc spellcaster called Gul'dan, but Gul'dan is noticeably evil, so none of the orcs want him to be leader of the orc horde. So instead, Gul'dan gets the biggest, dumbest orc war chief called Blackhand to be his puppet leader, while Gul'dan works backstage. See, Gul'dan is all about gaining more magical power, and the demons who trick Ner'zhul don't even have to bother tricking Gul'dan. Gul'dan is all about trading the orcs' free will to the demons in exchange for dark magic. Gul'dan is given a bunch of demon blood and he offers it to the horde, telling them it would make them the strongest, most badass guys around. The orcs drink the blood and start going crazy with bloodlust. They all but massacre the Draenei and afterwards are still so itching to fight that they just start fighting themselves. Gul'dan realizes that this is a problem, so he gets in contact with his demon masters and they instruct him to create a giant magic portal which will take the orcs to a new world where they can fight and conquer a whole other species. With that, they make a giant magical gate. It's called the Dark Portal, and Gul'dan leads the Horde through it to a new planet called Azeroth. Okay, so Azeroth is the name of the planet and also the name of the continent, kind of like if Earth was called Australia. So for the sake of everyone involved, I'm just going to call the planet Azeroth and the continent the Stormwind Kingdom. Cool. Alrighty, so on this new planet Azeroth, located on the southern continent, is where the human kingdom Stormwind is. These guys are ruled by King Lane, and he's pretty chill. King Lane has two best friends, the greatest knight who ever lived, Anduin Lothar, and the greatest wizard who ever lived, Medivh. Reports come in from the locals that green monsters have been terrorizing the southern lands of Stormwind. Anduin takes an army to investigate, he meets the orcs, and they fight. This is basically the First War. It's a whole bunch of nothing fights between Anduin Lothar and Warchief Blackhand. Meanwhile, Medivh and his young apprentice Khadgar are trying to figure out who the orcs are, what they want, and how they got to Azeroth to begin with. While trying to figure it out, Khadgar discovers that Medivh actually helped make the dark portal the orcs used. It turns out that Medivh has been possessed by one of the demon lords helping Gul'dan this whole time. Khadgar runs to tell King Lane and Anduin Lothar. King Lane tells the other two to go stop Medivh and that he'll be in charge of the defense of Stormwind while they're gone. Anduin and Khadgar rush over to Medivh's tower, and before they kill Medivh, Khadgar gets cursed by his master, turning him from a teenager into an old man. So they kill Medivh, then Anduin, Lothar, and old man Khadgar rush back to Stormwind just in time to see that it's under siege by the Horde. King Lane gets assassinated and the defense of the kingdom falls. Anduin and Khadgar gather as many people as they can, hop into a bunch of boats, and flee their kingdom. And with Stormwind in ruins, the Horde takes over, getting ready to pursue the human refugees. Okay, so that's the plot of Warcraft 1, Rise of the Horde, and The Last Guardian. Now we gotta do Warcraft 2. So it turns out that Gul'dan was telepathically connected to Medivh, and when the wizard died, the orc was put into a coma. Gul'dan wakes up a few days or whatever later to find out that the Horde has destroyed Stormwind. Nice. However, his puppet Blackhand was killed by an orc named Orgrim Doomhammer. Not nice. Gul'dan tries to be all like, hey Doomhammer, cool name, I'm kinda like the brains of the Horde, so if you want, I can take control again and it will be great. Except, Doomhammer actually hates Gul'dan and all demon magic. Doomhammer in fact killed all of Gul'dan's warlocks, and is like, the Horde used to have honor, and you ruined it for everybody. Either make yourself useful or I'm going to kill you. Gul'dan brings up the point that the humans have wizards, and since Doomhammer killed all the orc warlocks, the Horde don't have anyone to fight magic users. So then Gul'dan goes over and resurrects the corpses of human knights, but he puts the souls of orc warlocks inside of them. These guys are called Death Knights, and they have the physical skills of a warrior and all the magical skills of a warlock. Doomhammer is like, fine, you can stay alive, but I'm still in charge of the Horde. Gul'dan isn't happy that he isn't in charge anymore, and Doomhammer is still debating about killing Gul'dan, but they, along with the rest of the Horde, hop inside some boats and go chasing after the humans. Speaking of humans, the northern continent of Azeroth is called the Eastern Kingdoms, with the biggest kingdom being Lordaeron. The refugees show up in the kingdom of Lordaeron, and Anduin, Lothar, and Khadgar run into the cleverly named capital city, shouting about how the orcs are coming. So King Taranis II is the ruler of Lordaeron, and he's all about getting all the kingdoms together to fight the orcs. So all these kingdoms unite, and they make Anduin Lothar leader of the Human Alliance army. The elves of Quel'Thalas don't take the orc threat seriously enough though, and they only leave one group of archers behind to be a part of the human army. And the holy priests, after hearing about the orc warlocks and death knights, decide to offer up a counter. They're going to fight demon magic with holy magic, so they send in the Knights of the Silver Hand to join the Alliance army. These guys are paladins, and the notable ones are Tyrion Fordring, Uther the Lightbringer, and Turalyon. Turalyon fits right in with the boys from Stormwind. Anduin becomes a mentor to him, and he and Khadgar become fast friends. Turalyon also sparks a friendship with the leader of the Elven Archers, Illyria Windrunner. So these four are the big heroes of the Alliance, and before you know it, they'll have to face off against the Orcish Horde. The orcs have finally caught up to the humans in Lordaeron, and Anduin Lothar takes the Alliance army out to fight against them. Even with Death Knights, the orcs aren't doing great against the Alliance forces, so Doomhammer just starts retreating to try and find a way to get around the Alliance army. Lothar and Turalyon each split the army up and each take half. Lothar to protect Capital City, and Turalyon to chase after Doomhammer. The Horde decides to go around through the hinterlands in Airy Peak. There, they bring out their new weapons, Red Dragons. Turalyon is not prepared, but his army is saved by the arrival of Dwarven Griffin Riders. These dwarves are led by Kurger and Wildhammer. Kurdran teams up with Turalian to fight the orcs, but the horde keeps running away from combat. Doomhammer comes across some useful allies of his own, the Amani trolls led by Zul'jin. The two forces team up, but Zul'jin will only help Doomhammer take Capital City if the horde takes the elfish kingdom of Quel'Thalas first. They start making their way up through the mountains and begin a siege against the elf kingdom. Turalian and his army show up to Quel'Thalas, but the kingdom is already on fire. While the elves are still standing and fighting, they're not winning against the orcish horde, not until Turalian joins the fray anyway. With two armies pincering him, Doomhammer withdraws from the battle, taking the horde back to regroup. He tells Zul'jin that strategically it would be better to take out the humans first, then come back and finish off the elves. Zul'jin disagrees and the two split apart. Orgrim gets the horde back together and plans an assault on Capital City. He made a deal with a jealous human lord to allow him through a neighboring kingdom and surprise Anduin Lothar's defense force. Turalian is still miles behind in Quel'Thalas. It's a perfect opening for the horde to burn down another human kingdom. The two armies meet, the full might of the horde versus Anduin's half of the human army, but Anduin Lothar is a tough guy to beat. The alliance holds the horde at bay, but they're slowly breaking. Unfortunately for the horde though, Gul'dan takes this opportunity to take some of the orc army and flee. He was shown visions of a powerful demon artifact, one that would make him a god, so he convinces an orc clan or two to leave with him. They set sail to an island, open up a demon tomb, and Gul'dan and his minions are devoured by what lays inside. Back in Lordaeron, Orgrim is down some troops, but he's not out. Yet. When Turalian shows up with his army of humans and dwarven griffin riders and reinforcements from Quel'Thalas, that's when Orgrim Doomhammer is out. The orc starts retreating all the way out of Lordaeron to reach their new orcish stronghold, Black Rock Mountain. Now with a fully united human army and the armies of the other races, Anduin Lothar chases after the horde. The two armies meet at Black Rock Mountain and Orgrim Doomhammer kills Anduin Lothar in battle. Enraged by the death of his mentor, Turalian defeats Doomhammer and imprisons him. The orcs slowly get rallied up and are imprisoned, and the second war ends. Almost. So this part isn't particularly important to Warcraft 3, and I'll just skim over the finer points. The red dragons that were captured by the orcs were freed by 3 heroes, the Alliance starts rebuilding Stormwind, the humans make a giant fortress outside of the Dark Portal, where Turalian, Khadgar, Illyria, and Kurdran are all holed up in case the orcs come back. Meanwhile, on Draenor, Ner'zhul gets roused to save the orcs. One of the Death Knights, Terran Gorfin, is sent back to Azeroth to collect a few specific items. A small orc force heads into Azeroth, dodges Turalian's defenses, and heads out to find these mystical items. Terran Gorfin teams up with the Black Dragon Aspect Deathwing to get everything they need. Once all the items are gathered, Gorfin and Deathwing head back through the Dark Portal. Turalian and his friends lead a force called the Sons of Lothar to go after the orcs into their home world. The orcs, being led by Ner'zhul, head to the Black Temple, all while the Sons of Lothar are hot on their heels. Ner'zhul gets to the Black Temple and starts a ritual to open a new Dark Portal for his people to flee through. Unfortunately for everyone involved, Ner'zhul summons too many Dark Portals and rips his world apart. Literally. Everyone on Draenor, Turalian, Illyria, Kurdran, Gorfin, Ner'zhul, and every orc and human on the planet were lost forever as the planet was demolished. That is until later, but for all Warcraft 3 related purposes, that's basically what happens. And that is a summary of Warcraft 2 and its expansion. Okay, now we're almost done, just a few more things to get through. So, Orgrim Doomhammer escapes the prisons of Lordaeron and disappears into the wilds. Meanwhile, all the orcs that were captured at Black Rock Mountain have been put into internment camps for the past decade or so. And one of the camps, called Durnhold, the human warden Blackmore has found a baby orc and raised him. Blackmore wanted to have a personal gladiator, so he taught the baby to have all the strategy and intelligence of a human, but with all the strength and tenacity of an orc. He named his would-be gladiator Thrall. When Thrall grew up, he escaped Durnhold. In the wilds, he comes across Orgrim Doomhammer and Grom Hellscream. Orgrim was good friends with Thrall's father, and he tells Thrall everything about their homeworld and of Thrall's parents. Doomhammer and Hellscream comment about the uses of demon magic and how the orcs were corrupted. They tell Thrall about the old ways of the orcs, about shamanism and embracing the elements. Thrall ventures out to find his father's old clan, the Frostwolves. They teach Thrall how to be a shaman, and then when Thrall returns, he and Doomhammer team up with Grom Hellscream to liberate as many internment camps as possible. When they eventually get to the internment camp Durnhold, Doomhammer is killed during the liberation raid. In his last breaths, Doomhammer gives Thrall his weapon and his armor and claims that Thrall should be the war chief of the new horde. Thrall and Hellscream are currently liberating orcs and dodging Alliance forces in the Arathi Highlands by the start of Warcraft 3. So for this backstory, we'll have to travel back in time 10,000 years. Forever ago, the continents of Azeroth were all connected, kinda like Pangea. The race that dominated the world at the time were beings called the Night Elves. The Night Elves were heavy magic users, and they gained their magical powers from this thing called the Well of Eternity. However, Demon Lords, the same evil Demon Lords from Warcraft 1, go into contact with the Night Elf Queen, Queen Azshara. Queen Azshara decides to work with the demons and summon them into her world. Meanwhile, a small band of heroes disagree with that idea. They are the brothers Malfurion and Illidan Stormrage, Priestess Tyrande Whisperwind, and the demigod of the forest, Cenarius. Together, using holy magic from the moon and druidic magic from nature, they start to fight against the Night Elves, trying to bring the demons over. More and more of the Night Elf population begins to side with Malfurion and his friends, but by then it's too late. The demons have been summoned into Azeroth. Queen Azshara and her highborn followers set up to summon the Lord of the Demons while the Lesser Demon army goes and defeats the Uprising. Malfurion, his friends, the Night Elf army, all of the demigods, most of the dragons, and some other guys all team up at Mount Hyjal and push back against the demon forces. With enough room to break through, Malfurion, Illidan, and Tyrande get to the Well of Eternity and destroy it, separating the world into massive continents, stopping the demon ritual and defeating Queen Azshara. No longer able to use the magic from the Well of Eternity, the dragons provide a giant magical tree for the Night Elves along with teaching them druidic magic. The big tree grants the Night Elves immortality, but before everyone can go home and say job well done, Illidan does something stupid. Illidan isn't big on druid magic, and his lust for the Well of Eternity's power had him sneak away with a few vials of the well. When Illidan tries to recreate the Well of Eternity, Malfurion and the Night Elf leaders catch him and imprison him. The Night Elves now stay on their western continent at Kalimdor, far away from any of the wars between orcs and humans. Until Warcraft 3. Okay, almost done. Bear with me. King Taranis II is still ruler of Lordaeron, and his young son Arthas has recently become a paladin. Under the tutelage of Uther the Lightbringer, Arthas has defeated trolls, bandits, and orcs. Arthas had a girlfriend once upon a time, the mage Jaina Proudmoore, but he was focused on helping the people and she was focused on becoming a great wizard. And by the start of Warcraft 3, Jaina is attending the Warcraft version of Hogwarts, and Arthas is spending his days helping folks in need alongside Uther. And finally, the last thing that happens before Warcraft 3 starts, the absolute last thing you need to know, is after the destruction of Draenor, Ner'zhul, it turns out, is still alive. He was sucked into the realm of the Demon Lords who tried to manipulate him at the start of the video. The demons torture Ner'zhul, rip his flesh from his body, then his spirit from his remains, and put him into a giant block of ice and dump him on Azeroth. Ner'zhul is now a tool for the demons, and his job as the Lich King of the Undead is to wipe out all living things that stand against the demons and their burning legion. And that about does it. I abbreviated some things here, skipped some things there, but all in all, this is the important stuff that happens leading up to Warcraft 3. I tackled the events from Warcraft 1, 2, Beyond the Dark Portal, the books, and I even talked about some stuff from the game manual that was released alongside the original Warcraft 3. Hopefully this was explained coherently and made some sort of sense and was somewhat entertaining. If you enjoyed the video, let me know. If you want to know more about the lore, I'll leave some links in the description. Thanks a lot for watching, take it easy, and I'll see you all in Reforged. This video will cover the story of Warcraft 3 and its expansion, The Frozen Throne. Before watching, make sure to watch the pre-Warcraft 3 video I did to see how all these characters got to this point. Be warned, I'm not going to have every last detail in the video. Alright, cool. Let's get started. In the Eastern Kingdoms, the young warchief of the Horde, Thrall, is rallying together as many orcs as he can. Thrall is less about starting wars with the humans and more focused on finding a place for the orcs to call their own. He receives a vision of the Burning Legion attacking Azeroth and is then visited by a prophet. The prophet tells Thrall that his visions will become reality if he doesn't take the Horde to the far-off continent of Kalimdor. Thrall and his best friend, Grom Hellscream, rally as many orcs as they can and flee the Eastern Kingdoms, setting sail for Kalimdor. The prophet then goes to warn more warriors of Azeroth of the approaching demon invasion. He visits the wizard city of Dalaran, where he fails to convince Archmage Antonidas. And as the prophet leaves, Antonidas sends his apprentice, Jaina Proudmoore, out to investigate rumors of a plague in Lordaeron. The prophet, meanwhile, goes to the wisest and most respected of the human lords, King Tyrannus Menethil II, ruler of Lordaeron. Tyrannus, however, refuses to believe the prophet and has him thrown out of Capital City. Instead, the king is more interested in the plague being rumored about, and has word sent to his son to look into it. His son, Prince Arthas Menethil, is away fighting orcs with his paladin mentor Uther. Once finished dealing with the orcs, Arthas meets up with Jaina and the two set off to investigate the plague. The heroes come across infected and decaying granaries and farms, and eventually start to encounter the undead. Following the havoc caused by the undead, the two run into the necromancer in charge of the undead outbreak, Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad says the Scourge will wipe out all of the living, and if Arthas wants to stop them, he needs to go to Stratholme and confront the Dreadlord Mal'Ganis. Arthas then kills Kel'Thuzad, who doesn't seem that bummed about dying, and then heads off to Stratholme. It's revealed to Arthas that the undead plague is spread through infected grain, and too many grain shipments have been spread and shared throughout the countryside. The prophet visits Arthas and Jaina and pleads for them to run to Kalimdor with as many humans as they can. Arthas refuses. He's going to kill Mal'Ganis, and he's going to save his kingdom. So Arthas, Jaina, and Uther arrive at Stratholme, but it's too late. They discover that the citizens have already consumed the infected grain. They may be human now, but it won't be long before they're turned into the undead. Arthas declares a purge on the city, but Uther and Jaina refuse to participate in the slaughter of civilians, so they leave. Arthas lays siege to the city, and while doing so, he meets the demon dreadlord Mal'Ganis. Mal'Ganis explains that if Arthas wants to truly stop the Scourge, he'll have to fight the dreadlord one last time in the frozen land of Northrend. With Stratholme burning, Arthas leads his army to the northern continent. When Arthas arrives in Northrend, he meets Muradin Bronzebeard. Muradin and his dwarven expedition are looking for a powerful rune blade called Frostmourne, but before they could find the sword, the dwarves ran into the undead. Arthas and Muradin team up to fight the Scourge and find Frostmourne. Isolated from reinforcements, unable to retreat, and completely surrounded by the Scourge, Arthas and Muradin go to find Frostmourne while their armies hold off the undead. When they finally find the sword, Arthas gives up his soul to wield it, and in the process of acquiring Frostmourne, Muradin dies. Now wielding the rune blade, Arthas decimates the undead forces and comes face to face with Mal'Ganis. Frostmourne is the sword of the Lich King of the Undead, the creator of the Scourge and its true leader. By wielding Frostmourne, Arthas has given up his soul to the sword. Now the prince can hear the whisperings of the Lich King, and the whispers tell him to kill the Dreadlord. With Mal'Ganis dead, Arthas wanders off into the Arctic wasteland with nothing but the whispers of the Lich King to keep him company. A few months or so later, Arthas returns home to Lordaeron, but he's no longer the paladin prince who left. Now he's a Death Knight of the Lich King. Arthas murders his father and lays siege to Capital City. He then goes about recreating the undead cult of the damned and summoning up more of the Scourge army. The prince reunites with the ghost of Kel'Thuzad, but the necromancer can't be summoned into undeath like a normal corpse. Instead, he needs the power of the Sunwell to be properly resurrected. But before that, Arthas must carry the remains of Kel'Thuzad in a special urn, which is currently being held by the Knights of the Silver Hand. Arthas kills all of the knights, including Uther, retrieves the urn, and heads off to the High Elf capital of Silvermoon, where the Sunwell is located. The undead begin to fight against the High Elves, but the elves are putting up a strong defensive front. The defense of Silvermoon is being led by the Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner, and she keeps Arthas stalled by using clever tricks and tactics. Eventually, though, Arthas and the undead push through Sylvanas' defenses and start attacking the city. Arthas personally kills Sylvanas and brings her back from the dead as a banshee to torment her further. In the end, the Scourge reach the Sunwell, the source of the High Elf's power, and use it to bring back Kel'Thuzad, not as a necromancer, but as a powerful lich, corrupting and basically destroying the Sunwell in the process. Kel'Thuzad tells Arthas that the Lich King is a prisoner to the Burning Legion, and that the job of the Scourge is to weaken the forces of Azeroth, then summon the demon armies of the Legion to completely annihilate the planet. To summon the Burning Legion, they need the Book of Medivh, which is being held in Dalaran. So the undead army marches to the Wizard City, And even though Dalaran is protected by powerful magic and wizards like Archmage Antonidas, eventually the city falls. Kel'Thuzad then uses the Book of Medivh to summon the leader of the Burning Legion invasion, Archimonde, along with a massive army of demons. With Lordaeron, Silvermoon, and now Dalaran destroyed, there are few places left on Azeroth that can put up a resistance against the Burning Legion. On their way to Kalimdor, Thrall and some of his ships get swept up by the Maelstrom and end up on an island. Here the orcs meet the Darkspear Trolls and their leader Sen'jin. And Sen'jin explains that the Trolls have been fighting against a Sea Witch and her army of Murlocs. The orcs help the Trolls fight the Sea Witch while their boats get repaired. During the conflict, Sen'jin dies, but the orcs along with the Trolls are able to escape the island and set sail again for Kalimdor. Eventually the orcs reach Kalimdor, but Thrall and Grom's forces were split apart during the journey. While searching for Hellscream along the coast, Thrall meets Cairn Bloodhoof, chieftain of the Bloodhoof Tauren. Cairn and Thrall team up to help defend the Tauren against Centaur assaults and ambushes. Cairn then suggests that Thrall go seek out the Oracle up at Stone Talon Peak. The two part ways, Cairn to a safer place for his people and Thrall to find the Oracle. On his way to Stone Talon Peak, Thrall and his forces are reunited with Grom and his Warsong clan. However, the orcs encounter an enemy they weren't expecting to see here in Kalimdor: humans. Jaina Proudmoore decided to take the Prophet's advice and flee to Kalimdor with as many human refugees as she could. Grom recklessly leads an unprovoked attack on Jaina and her forces, which cause a brief skirmish. Because of this, Thrall sends Grom and his Warsong clan to Ashenvale Forest to start harvesting resources and create a base for the Horde, while Thrall continues up Stone Talon Peak. Grom is understandably annoyed to be on lumber duty while actual war is happening, but while chopping down trees, the orcs encounter yet another unexpected foe: the Night Elves and their demigod Cenarius. The Night Elves and orcs fight back and forth, but Cenarius is too powerful. The orcs begin to look for a way around the Night Elves and their protector, and while doing so encounter a wellspring full of demonic blood. Mini lore time! So the orcs were originally corrupted when the orc warlock Gul'dan made a deal with the demons of the Burning Legion. The Pit Lord Manaroth had the orcs drink his blood to power them, and also enslave themselves to the demon's will. Several years later, while the orcs and Night Elves are fighting in Ashenvale Forest, the Pit Lord Manaroth returns. He wants control over the orcs again, and vengeance against the Night Elves for defeating the Legion 10,000 years ago. So he leaves his demon blood for the orcs to find and consume. And Grom and the Warsong do just that. After drinking the blood, they turn into red, raging, and roided orcs who are powerful enough to push back the Night Elf forces and also kill Cenarius. While all of that is going down, Thrall was able to push his way into Stone Talon Peak thanks to Cairn showing up to help. Thrall and Cairn run into Jaina, and it turns out that all three of them are there looking for the same Oracle. The Oracle being the Prophet from before, who is actually Medivh, the Last Guardian. Medivh convinces the orcs and humans to work together against the Burning Legion, but first they need to stop Grom. The combined forces of orcs, trolls, Tauren, and the humans are able to wrangle up the rampaging Warsong and cleanse the demon bloodlust out of them. Afterwards, Thrall and Grom then go off to face against Manaroth. Grom manages to slay the Pit Lord, but he dies in the process. After freeing the orcs from their bloodlust, the remaining forces start setting up defenses for the upcoming battle against the Burning Legion. While the humans and orcs are setting up their defenses against the Legion, they also are meeting some resistance from the Night Elf Sentinels and their leader, Tyrande Whisperwind. Tyrande quickly retreats deeper into Ashenvale once the Burning Legion shows up and begins attacking the allied forces of orcs and humans. Tyrande had battled against the demons before 10,000 years ago, and knowing how much of a threat they are, she then goes to wake up her old allies, the Druids. The Night Elf Druids are powerful shapeshifters who have been sleeping in the Emerald Dream off and on for thousands of years. Tyrande fights her way through a now demon-infested Ashenvale to wake up the leader of her druids and the love of her life, Malfurion Stormrage. Once awoken, Tyrande and Malfurion go to wake up the remaining druids who are located in the Barrow Deeps. While diving deeper into the caverns, Tyrande and Malfurion come across an ancient prison, the one that holds Illidan's Stormrage, Malfurion's brother. Illidan was imprisoned because he tried to recreate the Well of Eternity to satisfy his lust for magic. Tyrande sees Illidan as a valuable asset in the battle against the demons, so she decides to free him. Malfurion declines to help free Illidan and instead goes to wake up the last of the druids. After being broken out of prison by Tyrande, Illidan goes to take out one of the commanders of the Burning Legion, the Dreadlord Tichondrius. However, to truly stop the Dreadlord, Illidan needs the help of a powerful magical artifact, this one being the Skull of Gul'dan. Illidan fights his way to the skull and uses it to turn himself into a powerful demon, strong enough to kill Tichondrius and push some of the demon forces out of Ashenvale. After accomplishing his mission, Malfurion is upset that Illidan would turn himself into a demon. Malfurion then banishes his brother from the Night Elf lands. The Archdruid can tell that the Night Elves alone won't be enough to stop the Burning Legion, so he convinces Tyrande to ally up with the Orcs and humans. Jaina, Thrall, Tyrande, and Malfurion have a plan to stop the invasion and defeat Archimonde. So the World Tree is a massive tree located on top of Mount Hyjal in the middle of Ashenvale, and Archimonde's goal is to drain the tree of its energy, stripping away the Night Elf's power and immortality. And Malfurion's plan is to let him do just that. The forces of the Orcs, humans, and Night Elves stall the demon advance long enough for Malfurion to set up a trap. When Archimonde reaches the World Tree and starts to drain it for power, Malfurion summons thousands of wisps who surround and detonate in and around Archimonde, destroying him and incinerating the World Tree. With Archimonde gone and the demon portals around Azeroth closing, the Burning Legion has been pushed back and the world is safe. Shortly after the Battle of Mount Hyjal, Illidan is approached by Kil'jaeden, who convinces the Demon Hunter to join him, and tasks the Night Elf to destroy the Lich King, who has started to rebel against the demons. So Illidan goes and summons a Naga army. Naga were highborn Night Elves who sank into the ocean along with Ashara 10,000 years ago, and are now evil snake people. While creating his army of Naga, Illidan is being pursued by his former warden, Maiev Shadowsong. Maiev and her wardens track Illidan throughout Ashenvale and far into the ocean, to the Broken Isles Gul'dan fled to during Warcraft 2. The Tomb of Sargeras and also of Gul'dan is located amongst the islands, and Illidan had plunged into the tomb in search of yet another powerful artifact, the Eye of Sargeras. Maiev and her wardens go into the tomb to stop Illidan, but they're too late. Several of the wardens are killed, and Maiev retreats, calling in aid from Tyrande Whisperwind and Malfurion Stormrage. The Night Elf leaders eventually show up, but it's too late to matter, and Illidan escapes to the ruined Eastern Kingdoms. Maiev, Tyrande, and Malfurion chase after Illidan, but when they reach Lordaeron, Malfurion goes off to help soothe the nature spirits that are currently in massive amounts of pain. Maiev and Tyrande go to hunt Illidan, and in the process run into Kael'thas Sunstrider, the leader of the High Elves, who now call themselves Blood Elves in honor of their dead countrymen. The Night Elves agree to help the Blood Elves traverse through the Scourge-infested lands in exchange for assistance in hunting Illidan. Tyrande then gets separated from the group, and when Malfurion shows up looking for her, Maiev lies and says that Tyrande was killed by the Scourge. So Maiev, Malfurion, and the Blood Elves go after Illidan to stop him from using the Eye of Sargeras. Kael then snitches on Maiev about Tyrande not being killed by the Scourge, and Illidan and Malfurion team up to go and save her from the undead. Once Tyrande is safe, Illidan and his army, after failing to kill the Lich King with the Eye of Sargeras, decide to run away into hiding and open a portal to the ruined wastes of Old Draenor, now called Outland. Maiev and her wardens quickly chase after them into another world. Kael'thas and the Blood Elves no longer have a home after Arthas destroyed Silvermoon and the Sunwell. Leaving the former High Elves with a desperate craving for magic, the Blood Elves are now in charge of repairing the destroyed Dalaran, and are being given orders by a racist human lord, Garithos. Garithos doesn't even allow the Elven warriors to fight, and has the Blood Elves on manual labor duty. While repairing some of the structures, an undead assault is approaching, and Garithos and his army of humans are away. Kael runs into Lady Vash, the commander of Illidan's Naga, and she convinces Kael to team up and take out the undead together. After the undead are defeated, Garithos comes back and then imprisons Kael and his Blood Elves for allying with the Naga. Vash breaks the Blood Elves out of prison and portals them all to Outland to join Illidan's army. Illidan offers the Blood Elves a new form of magic that they can use to satiate their hunger for magic the Sunwell left behind. Then Illidan, Kael, and Vash start to slowly take over the demon and fellwork populated wastes that is Outland. The other locals of Outland, the Draenei, led by Akama, also ally themselves with Illidan to attack the leader of the demon presence in Outland, Magtheridon. Illidan and his group attack Magtheridon's keep, the Black Temple, and capture the temple and the Pit Lord. The victory is cut short by Kil'jaeden appearing and giving Illidan an ultimatum. Either the Illidari kill the Lich King, or be killed by the Burning Legion. Arthas, believing his job is done, returns to Lordaeron, only to have a trio of Dreadlords there claiming ownership over the Lich King and the Scourge. Arthas rejects their claims and has to fight his way out of Capital City. He then begins to weaken and is being sent terrible warnings by the Lich King to come to Northrend as fast as possible. Before Arthas can fully prepare for a journey back to Northrend, Sylvanas had regained her free will, and with it she tries to kill Arthas. Before she finishes off, the weakened Death Knight Kel'Thuzad intervenes, buying time for his master to flee from the Dark Ranger and her banshees. Arthas begins to make his way to Northrend while Sylvanas figures out what to do with her newfound consciousness and her undead body. She decides to go after the Dreadlords and captures one of them, Varimonthras. Sylvanas and her army of Forsaken continuously fight and beat back the Scourge under the Dreadlord's control, leaving only one Dreadlord left in Capital City. The Banshee Queen teams up with Garithos and his human army, promising to leave her Forsaken after the Dreadlord is killed. However, after killing the last Dreadlord though, Sylvanas betrays Garithos and takes the ruins of Capital City for herself and her followers. Meanwhile, Arthas arrives in Northrend where he runs into Kael'thas. Kael tells Arthas that the Illidari are marching on the Frozen Throne in Icecrown to destroy the Lich King, and Arthas won't beat Illidan's army to Icecrown by conventional methods. Luckily for him, a Crypt Lord in service of the Lich King, Anubarak, finds Arthas and guides him through the ruins of the underground Nerubian city, Azul Nerub. After encountering all sorts of enemies and monsters in Azul Nerub, eventually Arthas and Anubarak reach Icecrown. The undead fight off Illidari's forces, and Arthas and Illidan even have a duel before the Frozen Throne, ultimately ending in the Demon Hunter's defeat. Arthas then climbs up the throne and joins himself with the Frozen Armor, becoming the Lich King we see in World of Warcraft. And finally, back on Kalimdor, Thrall and the Horde have started creating their home along the coast called Durotar, named after Thrall's father. Their city in Durotar is called Orgrimmar, named after Orgrim Doomhammer. A wandering Horde soldier from the Second War, Rexxar, a half-orc, half-ogre, meets Thrall in his developing city. Rexxar offers to help Thrall and the Horde with creating a new home, and in the process gets sent to the island of Theramore. Jaina Proudmoore has also set up a new home for the humans in Kalimdor. That would be Theramore Island. But her father, Admiral Dalen Proudmoore, who fought the Orcs in Warcraft 2, is bent on starting another war against the Orcs. Rexxar and Thrall invade Theramore and kill Dalen once it becomes apparent that he won't accept peace. And with that, tensions remain high. Not all Orcs and humans and Night Elves are friends, setting the stage for World of Warcraft and all of its expansions to come. Again, all of the story here is abbreviated. I've skipped some things here and there, but all in all, this is the gist of what happens in Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne. The amount of story and relevance to WoW in this game is a lot bigger than the previous titles, so there's a lot more to talk about. Anyway, if you like this video and haven't seen the previous lore video, I recommend you watch that. And if you want to see some more Warcraft 3 stuff, I did a review of the game, which you can find linked below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and take it easy. Hey there, team. It's finally here by popular demand. We got it done. All the lore of classic World of Warcraft. So, as usual, I'm going to give y'all a fair warning that I will not be covering every single quest chain and character, but instead I'll be going over all of the big important stuff that happened in Vanilla WoW that would lead to important events and moments in games that followed. I'll be skipping some stuff, cutting some stuff, and rearranging some other things to make the narrative flow better. The usual. So with that, let's get right to it. This is all of the lore of classic World of Warcraft. The Third War, which was Warcraft 3, has come and gone. After pushing back the Burning Legion and establishing their own capital city, Orgrimmar, the Orcish Horde has finally found themselves a home. The Horde was made up of Orcs, Trolls, and Tauren, and while the Tauren have moved to the grassier plains of Mulgore, the Orcs and Trolls have settled in Durotar. The top priorities of the Horde are to maintain their new borders, handle the wildlife within their new lands, and remove any lingering demon threat still lurking in Kalimdor. Meanwhile, the Night Elves have joined the alliance of humans, dwarves, and gnomes, who have been here the whole time. Lately, the elves have had to deal with their world tree being destroyed in order to stop Archimonde, but it turns out a totally new giant tree was planted and raised off the coast of Kalimdor, which now acts as the new home for the Night Elves. They are still in contention for their land with their new neighbors, the Horde. The Night Elves are also cleaning up Kalimdor from the demon invasion, destroying demons and cleansing any corrupted areas. And on the other side of the world, in the lands of Dun Moreau, between Lordaeron and Stormwind, the mountain dwarves are housing their good friends the gnomes in the dwarven city of Ironforge. Since the gnomes recently got evicted from their capital Gnomergon, the dwarves and gnomes fight together against the leper gnome invasion that has taken over the gnomish land, as well as trying to stop the Dark Iron dwarves from invading Ironforge, and fighting the Dark Horde from expanding beyond their hold over Blackrock Mountain. Meanwhile, up north, the Forsaken who follow Sylvanas Windrunner have taken up refuge in the Undercity, beneath the ruins of Capital City in the Eastern Kingdoms. The Forsaken have allied themselves with the Orcs and have joined the Horde. Even though they are now members of the Honorable Horde, the Undead still don't play by the same rules an Orc Warrior or Human Knight would. There's still a lot of scheming and a lot of distrust for the Undead. The Forsaken are mainly focused on dealing with the leftover Scourge that still serve the Lich King, and the humans that still reside in the Eastern Kingdoms, Alliance or otherwise. And finally, down south, the humans of the rebuilt Stormwind were not involved in the Third War. Instead, they were dealing with their own problems, mainly the Dark Horde that keeps pushing on their northern borders, the bandit group that defies Brotherhood that is attacking and looting all over human-controlled lands, and the mysterious disappearance of their king, Varian Wrynn. Varian Wrynn is the king of the humans of Stormwind. He kind of disappeared and didn't really help at all in Warcraft 3 because he was in a magically enhanced depression. One day, he randomly wakes up from it and decides to go and visit Jaina Proudmoore in Dustwall Marsh. On his way there, he gets captured by the Defias. There is a whole thing that happens with Varian, but it's hard to decipher what is and isn't canon from those events. Plus, Varian does not show up in the actual game of World of Warcraft until the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. So the only thing that matters about Varian in Classic is that he is missing. And Varian's son, Anduin Wrynn, is put in charge of Stormwind while his dad is gone. Anduin is counseled by two parties, Bolvar Fordragon and Katrana Prestor. While fighting some Dark Iron dwarves and Dragonkin, the Burning Steppes, the Alliance member Marshal Windsor, also known as Goldshire Footman, was captured and taken to Blackrock Mountain, home of the Dark Iron dwarves and a bunch of other baddies. A group of Alliance heroes goes into Blackrock to free Windsor, who also has some serious information regarding the Blackrock Orcs teaming up with a Black Dragonflight. Once Windsor is free from Blackrock Mountain, he returns to Stormwind where he and Bolvar confront Katrana Prestor, revealing her to be Onyxia, daughter of Deathwing, and the one responsible for capturing Varian, as well as many other crimes throughout the past decade. Onyxia flees to her lair in Dustwall Marsh, which the Alliance eventually assaults, killing her in the end. Meanwhile, Moira Bronzebeard, princess of the dwarven city of Ironforge, was kidnapped by Dark Iron dwarves and taken to the Dark Iron city located in the depths of Blackrock Mountain. Her father, Magni Bronzebeard, sent a squad of heroes into Blackrock Mountain to rescue her. This resulted in the death of the leader of the Dark Iron dwarves, Emperor Daegran Thorison, who was Moira's jailer, but ended up being her lover and eventually the father of her child. It turns out, while the Dark Iron dwarves aren't the nicest of people in usual circumstances, they were also being controlled by the elemental fire lord Ragnaros, having their minds poisoned over time, eventually becoming slaves to the fire lord's will. Ragnaros and his army of elementals dwelled even deeper in the mountain's core, its molten core. And while Moira fled to stay with the Dark Irons, the ragtag heroes would go off into Molten Core and defeat Ragnaros, ending his control of the Dark Iron dwarves, stopping the funneling of fire elementals into Azeroth, and earning some sweet gear along the way. Ragnaros wasn't the only lord residing in Blackrock Mountain. The Fire Lord was in a constant struggle for control of Blackrock against Nefarian, eldest son of Deathwing and leader of the Black Dragon flight surrounding Blackrock Mountain, as well as the Dark Iron horde that dwells inside. Nefarian is trying to achieve his father's dreams of reviving the Black Dragon flight, and to do that, the Black Dragon has gathered dragons from all other flights and experimented on them to create the new chromatic dragon flight. With the Black Dragons aiding the Dark Horde, the war chief of the Horde, the normal Horde, the Horde, Thrall, sent some champions into Blackrock Mountain to put a stop to the Dark Horde and their allies, the Black Dragon flight. The Horde champions teamed up with the Red Dragon Valistraz, who helped sneak them into Blackrock Spire, where they fought a bunch of Blackrock orcs, trolls, ogres, and dragonkin. After clearing out Blackrock Spire and killing the Dark Horde war chief, Renda Blackhand, the group moved on to take out Nefarian. However, Nefarian was able to possess Valistraz and bend him to the Black Dragon's will. The champions would kill their former companion and shut down all of the chromatic dragonflight experiments, finally leading to a confrontation against the head honcho himself, Nefarian. Firelord banished, the Dark War Chief executed, the Dwarf Emperor assassinated, and the Black Dragon decapitated, both Alliance and Horde champions left Blackrock Mountain in ruins. 1,500 years before the Dark Portal was first opened, there was a massive empire that dominated most of the southern and eastern kingdoms. The Gurabashi Empire. This massive troll empire served their god of death, Hakar the Soul Flayer. However, there was a civil war and the empire crumbled, with some of the more zealot surviving Gurabashi priests escaping from their capital of Zol-Garub to the Swamp of Sorrows. There, the troll priests created the Temple of Atal Hakar, where they planned to summon the Blood God into Azeroth. The Green Dragon aspect, Ysera, got wind of the troll's plans, and her flight destroyed the temple, sinking it into the swamp. She then left some green dragons to watch over the place, to make sure nothing bad ever happened again. Fast forward to World of Warcraft time, and those green dragons had succumbed to the corruption of the Emerald Nightmare, as well as the corruption of Hakar. The blood of the green dragons became fuel to bring the Blood God into Azeroth, while their bodies were used as sentinels against intruders. A group of adventurers were sent into the sunken temple of Atal Hakar by a few curious parties, including a troll named Yak-Kenya, who feared that the temple was close to summoning the Blood God, and provided an ancient egg to the adventurers which could be used to trap Hakar's essence. The sunken temple was cleaned out by the heroes who killed all the troll priests and corrupted Green Dragonflight, finally confronting the avatar of Hakar and sealing his essence in the ancient egg. When the egg was returned to Yak-Kenya, it was revealed that the troll was secretly a worshipper of the Soul Flayer, and he then brought Hakar's essence to Zol-Garub, the original capital of the Gurabashi trolls, where the Blood God was then brought into Azeroth. Hearing rumors that the Gurabashi had successfully summoned Hakar, the king of the Zandalari trolls had sent an entourage of troll priests into Zol-Garub. But just like the green dragons in the sunken temple, the Zandalari priests also fell under the corruption of Hakkar. With the blood god alive and gaining ever more powerful inside the ancient troll city, the Darkspear tribe was called on for aid and the might of the Horde along with them. The Horde champions dove into Zul'Gurub and cleaned it out of all the blood god worshippers, the corrupted priests, and even defeating the blood god himself. Around 1,000 years ago, in southern Kalimdor, there was a giant war between the insectoid Karaji and the alliance of night elves and dragons. This was called the War of the Shifting Sands, and it was brutal since the Karaji were unending, and many night elves and dragons died in the conflict. Eventually, the insectoids were pushed back into their fortress of Ahn'Qiraj. The night elves used their druidic magic combined with the power of the dragons to erect a giant magical barrier known as the Scarab Wall, which would then seal away the monstrous Karaji and their dark, mysterious master in the heart of the Silithus Desert for 1,000 years. Now, in the era of Vanilla WoW, the descendants of Ahn'Qiraj are stirring, and they plan on coming back to lay waste to the lands of Azeroth once again. The heroes of the Horde and the Alliance rallied together into the force known as the Might of Kalimdor, and they ventured into the ruined city. The Might of Kalimdor would defeat the Karaji and fight their way into the city's center where the old god Cthulhu awaited them. The old god was slain and the Karaji forces were laid to rest. With the rising of the Scourge during the Third War, several members of the illustrious Paladin Order, the Knights of the Silver Hand, were slain. The remaining members who stayed in the undead-filled Lordaeron were led by High Lord Alexandros Morgraine and Sadon Deathrohan, who continuously held off the undead Scourge from advancing into their stronghold of Hearthglen. The Silver Hand was able to fight back against the Scourge, winning some fights and even setting up some strongholds outside of Hearthglen in the process, mainly the Scarlet Monastery located nearby the now forsaken occupied Lordaeron ruins, and retaking parts of the ruined city of Stratholme. However, during a battle against the undead in Stratholme, Commander Sadon Deathrohan was killed and his corpse was possessed by the Dreadlord Balnazar, who had faked his death by the hand of his brother Varamonthras back in Warcraft 3. Balnazar then manipulated the son of Alexandros Morgraine, Renko, to kill his father, tainting Morgraine's legendary weapon, the Ashbringer, as well as silencing the only threat of leadership to Balnazar's position as head of the Silver Hand. Balnazar then decided to rename the Knights of the Silver Hand to the Scarlet Crusade, with their main objective being to wipe out all they considered evil in Azeroth by any means necessary. The indiscriminate slaughter and torture the Scarlet Crusade began enacting on not just the undead, but of non-human races too, was too much for some members, and they branched off and formed a different order known as the Argent Dawn. While the Scarlet Crusade would continue their Scarlet Crusade of blood and death of all that opposed them, the Argent Dawn was focused on allying itself with all races in hopes of setting up a united defense against the undead scourge infesting the plague lands of the Eastern Kingdoms. The three factions began skirmishing in the Eastern Plague Lands: the zealous Scarlet Crusade, the noble Argent Dawn, and the never-ending Scourge. The right hand of the Lich King, the Lich Kel'Thuzad, had led an assault on the Eastern Kingdoms, hovering his floating base of operations, Naxxramas, above the scarlet-infested city of Stratholme. In Stratholme, the Scarlet Crusade waged war against Kel'Thuzad's minions. However, a young member of the Argent Dawn was planning on leading a strike force into the ever-burning city and invading the undead fortress of Naxxramas. While Alexandros Morgraine was murdered by his oldest son, Renko, his youngest son, Darian Morgraine, would fight against the Scourge and the Scarlet Crusade. Darian assaulted Nax, and inside, his team of Argent Dawn members would cut away enough of the forces inside that the floating city was practically gutted. The final encounter Darian and his team faced was against the Four Horsemen, powerful Death Knights under the Lich King's command. And the leader of the Horsemen was Darian's father, Alexandros Morgraine, wielding the corrupted Ashbringer. After the fight, Darien was the only survivor, and he left Naxxramas, taking the Ashbringer with him. When Darien returned to Light's Hope Chapel, the home base of the Argent Dawn, it was under attack by Kel'Thuzad. In this confrontation, Darien sacrificed himself by piercing his own heart with his father's corrupted sword, freeing the soul of the older Mograine and destroying the attacking undead forces. However, Darien's soul was lost to the Scourge, and Kel'Thuzad retreated with a new Death Knight. Bolvar Fordragon would later call upon heroes of the Alliance to aid the Argent Dawn in their time of need, and the Alliance forces alongside the Argent Dawn would assault the weakened Naxxramas and kill Kel'Thuzad. However, to kill a Lich, you have to destroy their phylactery, and while the phylactery of Kel'Thuzad was handed over to a High Priest of the Argent Dawn, the Holy Order claims to have never received it. They were betrayed, and Kel'Thuzad's phylactery, as well as a High Priest of the Argent Dawn, went missing. And that is all the main lore of Classic WoW. I covered mainly the broad strokes of the endgame, since WoW lore gets really messy with what is and isn't canon, with books saying one thing, the game saying another thing, and then the game retconning itself and saying a totally different thing, and so on and so on. But if you just play Classic WoW, all of this info was correct in that context. So time for me to say the stuff. Thanks for watching. I skipped some things here, skipped some things there, but all in all, this is all the stuff you need to know. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and take it easy. Hey there, team. I'm gonna keep this short and sweet. After the massive success of World of Warcraft, it wasn't long before its expansion would be released, filled with new plot elements and focusing on some older characters from previous Warcraft games. If you haven't watched the previous lore recap videos, I highly recommend checking them out before watching this one, in case I skip over a few things. Anyway, this is an abbreviated history lesson, so I will be skipping some things here and there, but it will be all the lore you need to know that canonically happened during the 2007 released expansion of A Burning Crusade. Now, our story all starts in the Eastern Kingdoms, in the Elven Kingdom of Quel'Thalas, with Prince of the High Elves, Kael'thas Sunstrider. Kael'thas is a powerful mage who eventually becomes a member of Dalaran's Council of Six, the highest and most elite of the mages of the Wizard City. Years later, he develops a crush on this girl called Jaina Proudmoore, but finds out she's in a relationship with a totally different prince and gets super salty. During the events of Warcraft 3, that certain prince, Prince Arthas Menethil of Lordaeron, becomes a servant to the Lich King and amasses an army of undead which ravage the human kingdom. Arthas then leads his undead scourge to the Elven Kingdom of Quel'Thalas to use its font of power, the Sunwell. Arthas swept through the High Elven defenses, slaughtering well over 50% of the entire High Elven population, finally arriving at the Sunwell. And the Sunwell is this impossibly powerful source of magic and power that filled the High Elves. It was like an energy source that gave them strength. And after Arthas and his scourge corrupted the Sunwell to bring the necromancer Kel'Thuzad back as a lich and destroyed Silvermoon in the process, the undead began their march to Dalaran. When Kael hears about this, he abandons Dalaran to meet its downfall, since nobody was going to help him, and the only person he cared about in Dalaran didn't love him, but instead loved the murderer of his people. So Kael leaves and heads back to Quel'Thalas, only to find his homeland destroyed and most of his people dead. There, he and the remaining High Elves would destroy the corrupted Sunwell, leaving them now hungry and drained, since their source of energy for thousands of years had been cut off. Addicted to mana, Kael led some of the now newly named Blood Elves to Dalaran, leaving Lorthamar Thuran as Regent Lord over Quel'Thalas and the remaining Blood Elves until Kael returned. And this is where Kael's role in Warcraft 3 happens. I cover this all in the Warcraft 3 lore video, but real quick, Kael eventually makes it to the ruins of Dalaran, where he and his soldiers are taken prisoner by Lord Garithos. Illidan's storm rages, serpent servant Lady Vashj helps Kael'thas and the prince escape their prison cells, and then they all teleport to Outland to meet Illidan. There in Outland, Illidan promises Kael a cure to his people's mana addiction, which is essentially just feeding off of fel magic instead of arcane magic. The Blood Elves help Illidan and the Naga defeat the fel orcs and demons of Outland, but ultimately are discovered by Kil'jaeden, one of the main leaders of the Burning Legion, and he tasks them with killing the Lich King in Northrend. Illidan and his armies try to kill Arthas and the Scourge in Icecrown, but fail and retreat back down. After the failed attack on Icecrown, Kael takes over a former fortress in Netherstorm known as Tempest Keep, and captures its sole guardian, a powerful being called a Naru. Kael then sends soldiers back to Azeroth to retake Silvermoon and teach the Azeroth-bound Blood Elves how to deal with mana addiction, the way Illidan taught Kael. The prince even delivers them the captured Naru, Muru, which a group of Blood Elves use to siphon and control the power of the light. These elves would be known as Blood Knights. But while the people of Silvermoon had their addiction satiated for now, they were craving a more permanent replacement for what the Sunwell had left behind. Kael, failing to find that permanent replacement, became unstable and untrusting of his people. He doubted himself for coming to Outland since they still hadn't found the promised cure, and he believed his people doubted him for the same reasons. Some of Kael's soldiers started defecting from his armies, seeing Outland not as the paradise Kael and Illidan had promised, but as a prison on a dying world. These soldiers were sent to fight off some resistance in Shattrath City, but they ultimately defected and joined the Naru. This only added to Kael's continued paranoia, which caused him to enter an alliance with Kil'jaeden. The Demon Lord promised Kael a way to satisfy the hunger the Blood Elves felt, in exchange for their allegiance to the Burning Legion. When the Blood Elves found out about Kael working with the demons, a large number of them considered it a betrayal and abandoned Kael and joined the Naru. The Blood Elves of Silvermoon heard about this betrayal as well, and they decided to leave Kael'thas, and were offered a position to join the Horde, thanks to Sylvanas Windrunner, leader of the Horde faction, the Forsaken. Many years ago, on the planet Argus, there lived a people known as the Eredar. And one day, the Burning Legion invaded the planet, corrupting and absorbing the Eredar into the Legion itself. One of the leaders of the Eredar, Prophet Valen, resisted the Legion's corruption. Valen then rallied as many Eredar as he could, and with the help of powerful beings of light known as the Naru, Valen and his followers escaped Argus and the Burning Legion. Now calling themselves the Draenei, Valen and his people traveled the stars on the Naru ship called the Genadar, which after years of travel eventually crash-landed on the planet Draenor. The Draenei lived on Draenor for over 200 years, more or less peacefully, with the Orcs, who also called that world home. But the Burning Legion eventually came a-callin', as it always does, and the Legion tempted the Orcs with demon blood to kill the Draenei. As they did, the Orcs united into a force known as the Horde, and the Horde would cull nearly all of the Draenei on Draenor. Velen and some of the surviving Draenei went deep into hiding for many years, avoiding Orcs, demons, and eventually Illidari forces. The Draenei led an assault on the Blood Elf-occupied Tempest Keep, where they were able to steal a former Naru ship, the Exodar. The Exodar would end up colliding into a planet, this one being Azeroth. They landed on the Azurmist Isles off the coast of Kalimdor. There they ran into the Alliance, which they had heard about from the Sons of Lothar, and decided to join them. And on Azeroth, the Dark Portal hadn't been open in almost 20 years, but a Doomguard called Lord Kha'Zix found an unknown artifact of incredible power, which he used to reopen the Dark Portal into Outland. The Draenei convinced the Alliance to venture out into Outland to stop the flow of demons, and the Blood Elves convinced the Horde to do the same, both factions fearing for their people that had been left behind on the deteriorating world. The Horde and Alliance find Shattrath City and find out that the Lord of Outland is Illidan Stormrage, and that Illidan is power-hungry and insane. Illidan tries fighting the Horde, the Alliance, the Shattar of Shattrath, all for sole control over Outland. While the Burning Legion and their demons, led by Kil'jaeden, are also on Outland trying to kill Azeroth soldiers, the Shattar, and Illidan. Heroes from Warcraft 2 are also met in Shattrath City, like Khadgar, as well as some other members of the Sons of Lothar, and they have allied themselves with the Shattar of Shattrath as well as the Naru in their fight against Illidan and their fight against the Burning Legion. The Horde and the Alliance team up and go throughout Outland, taking on prominent members of Illidan's army, like Kargath Bladefist and the Felwork army in Hellfire Citadel, Lady Vosh and her Naga in Serpent Shrine Cavern, and Kael'thas and his remaining loyal Blood Elves in Tempest Keep. Akama was once a vindicator of Karabor, the great temple of light of the Draenei. But when the Burning Legion corrupted the Orcs and stirred them to war, Karabor fell and became the Black Temple. After Ner'zhul used the Black Temple to sunder Draenor over 20 years ago, Magtheridon and the Burning Legion took over what remained of what was now called Outland. Akama, along with many of the Draenei, was infected and plagued by fell energies used by the Orcs. He became what was called a Broken, and shunned away from the Draenei in order to not infect anybody else. Akama led several other broken Draenei in claiming some of their land back from the Legion. Years later, Illidan would arrive in Outland, where Akama would pledge his service to the Demon Hunter in hopes of retaking the Black Temple. And when Illidan did reclaim the ruins of Karabor, he took over the temple for himself. Illidan grew more corrupted by the fell magic he used, and out of fear of his enemies, Arthas and Scourge and Kil'jaeden in the Burning Legion, Illidan began to consolidate more and more power and hold a tighter grasp on Outland. Akama realized that Illidan was no improvement over Magtheridon, and so Akama reached out to Maev's Shadow Song for assistance. Maev hunted Illidan throughout Warcraft 3, trying to re-imprison the Betrayer. And Maiev, still filled with all this hatred for Illidan, led strike after strike against the Illidari forces, until Illidan became aware of Akama's treachery with Maiev. Illidan bound a part of Akama's soul, holding it prisoner in the Black Temple, which forced Akama to bend to Illidan's rule. Akama then led Maiev and her soldiers into a trap where all but Maiev were killed. The Warden was taken to a prison to be tortured and trapped there forever. But as it goes, the Scryers and Aldor of Shattrath City and heroes of the Horde and Alliance began to fight back against Illidan and his
Hey, what's up everyone? Today we're going to take a look at each Wayfinder's backstory heading into early access. There's so much to uncover as we begin this journey, and we'll be there to learn all the mysteries as we follow the game, new seasons, new characters, and stories. If you enjoy the Wayfinder content, then make sure to subscribe as there's much more on the way. Every character has a unique point of view in how to navigate the gloom and world of Evanor. We, the players, are provided short backstories to give us insight into our heroes' perspectives, personalities, relationships, and experiences that ultimately shape their motives and ideals. Over time, we will learn about each individual Wayfinder and connect moments of time to uncover truths obscured by the gloom. Wingrave is an Archon Templar wearing spell-forged armor and sustained by his faith in the Architects. He's a natural leader and true champion, always ready to defend the innocent and to smite the forces of evil. Long before the Gloomfall, he fought monsters in the shadows and defended the people of the Empire from the terrifying threats of the maze. These are the things that Wingrave's Echo remembers when he's first reborn. Of all the champions, Wingrave is the one who most feels like a hero, a true champion of light. However, as the player uncovers more of Wingrave's past, they'll uncover the darker side of the Empire and the Archons, such as not all denizens of the maze are monsters, and brutal actions like the massacre of the monks at Ireally. Ultimately, Wingrave's Echo will have the opportunity to be a better man than the original, to live up to his ideals and be the champion he could and should have been. Senja, a legend across the Avar Imperium, the greatest champion ever to grace the arena. Where many gladiators face death with grim resolve, Senja delights in every battle. Even now, Senja still hears the crowds when she fights, still imagines the cheering throngs urging her on. In truth, she loves battle because it's a distraction from her pain. Senja comes from the dominion of the Seven Winds, a place where arcane magic is woven into the everyday life, where arcanists and war masters alike wield power over the elements. While she is far from home, the storm still answers her call. She is the last of the Iron Sisters, a proud order of deadly warriors. She doesn't talk about what happened to her sisters, but there's no question that their loss is a knife in her heart. That whatever happened in the Dominion drove Senja to the other side of the world and into the endless distraction of the arena. Now that the gloom has swallowed the arena, Senja needs a new battle to distract her from her pain, and the gloom is the greatest enemy of all. Senja is a fearless warrior and indomitable foe, but as an Echo returned from the gloom, there's much she can't remember. She remembers fighting alongside the Iron Sisters, but she can't remember exactly how they fell. She remembers countless battles in the arena, but she knows she can't remember every enemy she faced, and the possibility of forgotten enemies coming back to haunt her. Nis is kin to the shadows, and darkness serves as her weapon and her cloak. She is one of the Deep Eldrin, an ancient people who now serve the malevolent Precursors. When Nis and her clan challenged the Precursors, her family was wiped out and Nis escaped into exile. Deadly and swift, Nis cares little for humanity. But she has sworn to destroy the Precursors, and the Seekers can help her take her revenge. The Eldrin are the first children of the Broken World, formed from the blood of innocents spilled in the Aegis War. There are Eldrin of the woods and water, but Nis is one of the Deep Eldrin, born in the abyss of stone and still untouched by the sun. Her people shape shadows like clay, and Nis mastered the shadow dance as a child, learning to sculpt shielding shrouds and deadly blades from insubstantial darkness. For all their many gifts, the Eldrin are a dying people, whose essence fades with each generation. When the ancient Mother of Shadows came to them, promising renewed strength in exchange for absolute loyalty, most swore themselves to her service. When Nis and her clan refused to bow to the Precursors, most were slain, but Nis escaped into exile. She has sworn to destroy the immortal beings who have corrupted her people, whatever the cost. Nis is a grim and deadly warrior, a silent assassin who strikes from the shadows. But as an Echo returned from the gloom, there's much she cannot remember. She knows she endured countless hardships in her time of exile, but the details escape her. She remembers challenging the Mother of Shadows, but not how she survived. Arcane power flows through Kairos, and can unleash this force to devastate his enemies. He's the last survivor of a forgotten civilization, a wizard who transforms his flesh into pure mystical energy. Though his people are long lost, he's sworn to keep the gloom from destroying the world that remains. There's a place known as the Kingdom of Ashes. Bones are scattered across beaches of black sand, and charred remnants of crystal spires still reach toward the sky. This has been a shunned ruin for thousands of years, but Kairos still remembers it as it once was. A glorious civilization whose achievements dwarf those of the Avar Imperium or the Maze. He remembers studying of the nature of reality itself, and even learning how to transcend his own flesh to becoming a being of pure mystical energy, bound to a skeleton of arcstone and crystal. While he possesses devastating power, Kairos is first and foremost a scientist. He is determined to stop the gloom. He will not watch another civilization be destroyed, but he believes the key of defeating the gloom is to understand it. Is a brilliant reason that has been lost into wars and much is forgotten in other areas. What became of his people? How did the Turkish nation become the kingdom of Adam? And did he have something to do with it? The answers must be out there, waiting to be found. Swift and precise, Silo makes every shot count. Born into a family of smugglers, he spent his life running under the radar and challenging tyrants. Now he's using those same skills to fight the gloom. Silo loves long odds. The greater the challenge, the greater the thrill. Before the Gloomfall, the Strike Syndicate was a network of smugglers and mercenaries who played both sides in the endless conflict between the Avar Imperium and the Maze. While many saw the Strikes as criminals, they lived by a code. Silo was born inside of the Vex. The Vexes were the leaders of the Syndicate and made sure that the Strike served the common people of the West. Silo was an exceptional Strike, excellent marksman, and enthusiastic. He always kept the shadow on his parents, the expectation that he eventually ascended to supervision. Silo was a Vex scoundrel who seemed quickly to take them into place. He remembers grand moments of the people of the West, but as an echo returns from the gloom, memories are easy. Silo doesn't remember the happy experience, or how he can defeat Silo. In this broken world, the Strike has realized what has Silo forgotten. Enemies of the Warriors 5 in the Maze, and her poisons have changed the course of history. But the gloom has followed close to Henry, and eventually war is over. Then they survived, and for now this is the before the fall, the main venomous was feared among the Imperial ranks. Those unfortunate enough to have submitted to the name that would survive. The venomous was spying from the monster.
Get behind me!
Getting tired of born in the maze, closest friends of goblins and battle beasts, and though she was appearance most a brilliant alchemist and inventor, Venomous has always preferred to stalk and prey in the shadows, mixing styles in a workshop. Most of all, Ven plays the challenge. Doom is the greatest challenge of all. Venomous has lead the Avar Imperium is an oppressive, warmongering machine devoted to life and conflict. Now, the Empire has finally fallen, consumed by the gloom. But all she hoped to protect in the maze has been lost as well. Then, care for Wingrave and the other Imperial soldiers among the soldiers. But she recognizes that a blood war is over. In the wake of the Gloomfall, survival is the only thing that matters, and Venomous determines to survive, no matter the cost. And there we have it, a brief backstory for each Wayfinder heading into early access. More stories will continue to unfold and will be there every step of the way. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. Let me know in the comments which Wayfinder you're most excited to learn about. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.